welcome to our lecture. My name is Alessandra Moctezuma, and I'm the gallery director here at Mesa College. And we're very happy and honored to have here artist Ross Drago, whose work is on exhibit downstairs on the second floor. And for those people that might have come from a class directly to the lecture, the exhibit is on the second floor in the corridor, by the computer. So go down there and check it out after the lecture. Ross Drago has come all the way from the Berkeley area. He lives in Oakland, and as an artist, in recent years, he's been experimenting with modular art. So he's going to give a talk and explain the whole concept and symbolism behind the pieces that are downstairs in the second floor. As an artist, he's worked not only as a painter, but he's also done several very important public art commissions, and he's translated some of those paintings and those textures into ceramic murals. And one of the most recent ones was at the Linus Pauling Center up in the Bay Area?
In Palo Alto.
In Palo Alto. So, I just want to give a round of applause and thank Ross Drago for being here.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the people who helped unpack the modules and find a way to reassemble them, which is probably no easy trick because they were written in the energy symbol language that I usually use. But I'd like to explain a little bit about the modular art. Modular art happened because I realized that I paint. I love to paint in so many ways that it was really beyond schizophrenia. It was well into just multiple personalities, and I longed after a point to see a painting that would have all of the different ways that I loved to paint, and so that eventually gave me the idea of painting in stretching canvases that were hexagons, pentagons, triangles, and squares, and painting in many different ways, and trying to assemble these into units that were paintings, such as the paintings downstairs. Ironically, what happened was, after I began doing this, I developed a language that I call energy symbols, and that began unifying the way that I was painting, so that there was perhaps no longer a need to have all these modules that had a separate quality being unified, but they did. But the language, to me, is very rich in variations as well, and I would like to explain a little bit about that language before we see the slides. I would also like to say that a while ago I realized that I wasn't, that my work appeared to be simultaneous to me. I didn't see it as something that I was chronologically discovering. To me, it was as if all of this work already existed somewhere, and I was forced to produce it in time somehow. And so I would do this, and I would do that, and I would do this from this time, from that time, and create this body of work that to me seemed to already exist. It's just that nobody else could see it but me. So that gave me the idea that what I'm really doing is producing the artwork of a culture, an energy-conscious culture that I began to refer to as equilibrians. And equilibrians are people who live in the state of equilibrium. And the state of equilibrium, to me, represents a state of awareness, of knowing that they know, of being conscious that they're conscious. and being in a medium which expresses all of the infinite potential of being conscious, of being awareness itself. And this medium is a medium of energy. And from there began to grow the energy symbol language. And so that's what I've been working with ever since. And that's probably beginning 25 years ago. So very briefly, I'll try to explain this language, and I can explain it briefly because I think it's a language that we all understand already. It comes from just being part of terrain in a way. And this, to us, is mountain-like. And we aspire to climbing that mountain. And that, in the energy symbol language, becomes this or anything like that. Any wave that rises becomes a symbol of desire or confidence. And when we approach anything like this, that becomes a symbol of fear. Just because we're part of gravity, we're part of a system where it may lure us to the top, but as we go to the other side, fear mounts in us just as beings because we know of the dangers involved here. And so we have the beginning of a language that people can understand and already do understand. And so we have this meaning desire, and this symbolizing fear. And when they're equal and opposite, they cancel one another. When desire and fear occupy the same intensity within us, they cancel one another, and we are neither desirous nor fearful, but lucid, awake. We see, we just witness. And that is the first energy symbol. I call it the symbol of equilibrium, the sign of equilibrium. And then I qualify that and say that that's a radiant state. And whenever that exists, I put a circle there that shows these were there, but they canceled, they left, and they leave a circle which symbolizes lucidity or witnessing, consciousness, awareness. And then I qualify it in two ways. I do this to symbolize male energy, which is not saying this is a man or a woman, this is saying this is giving energy. And then I qualify it also into this. And that is a symbol of female energy, which again simply means that is receiving, receptive. So this symbolizes a conscious being who is in a receptive energy state. And I put these as a kind of support. And that is because when a person's in a receptive energy state, that leaves the person vulnerable, open, consciously and deliberately saying, I will take my chances, I will open up to this and be receptive. At which point, the universe rushes in to protect that person, that state. And so I put this here as a symbol of supporting that. It's usually just 3. Saying when you make yourself receptive, you make yourself vulnerable, and other things come in to protect you in that state. So this is the beginning of beliefs for an equilibrium culture. And then the other important aspects of this culture that I have sort of invented, these equilibriums, are that they believe that there are just two things: awareness, which they believe themselves to be, and energy, which is everything that we see around us, that we're calling physical reality, which we already learned is actually an energy, a vibratory reality. This is our medium of self-expression, meaning energy expresses all of the infinite potential in being pure consciousness. And that's why it's called a medium of self, capital S, expression. So those are two of the main beliefs of what I call equilibrium thinking. And so I'm going to begin showing you my work, but from this point on, I'm not going to treat it as my work. I'm going to treat it as a culture that has evolved outside of myself, and I'm going to take it from ancient equilibrium art, which is about 1969 AD, into the future to about 2012, when I think things really get exciting. And as I do that, I will explain the artwork in relationship to that. Set for automatic, but I don't know if that...
You also have a focus up here.
A reproduction of one of the first equilibrium dwellings in, pick a town, Philadelphia. 1972 AD. The first person who ever decorated his home with energy symbols. Nothing was made of this other than an eyesore in town. And it was where he lived, in the suburbs, farther. He was surrounded by suburbs, and it was forgotten. Yet, as time went on, this in a completely separate part of the country, in Kansas, the same energy symbols began to be used as building blocks in another home. Also, nothing that raised any eyebrows or saw any connection, but a very quiet and interesting thing was taking place. A visual language was beginning to be built in, cast into the architecture of now two homes in America. And this from the same building. And this from yet another building. So that we begin to get a sense, a language that is building and being employed in architecture. These are sand cast pieces, and they are about 4 foot square, and this is a symbol of female energy. It's a very, very textural piece. I dreamed that sand castings would be made in concrete for architecture. In fact, for many years I went to architects and showed them sand castings and ceramic tiles, 1 foot square ceramic tiles, and I tried to get architects to commission these for commission so that they could know that they would be all 1 foot square and modular, so that they themselves could figure out what it would cost and exactly how it could go together. They never seemed to go for that. They went for the tiles themselves, and I would leave 5 or 6 tiles, and when I would come back, I would find checks waiting because they would buy the tiles from me. They were $100 each at the time. But they would never seem to dare to propose the idea to their clients. So I did that for about 3 years, and I finally sort of lost faith in architects as being a someone who might be a good way to get architectural commissions to happen. So I began thinking that perhaps builders would be freer to just incorporate something that they liked. This is just a detail of the same piece. And again, trying to give you a sense of the sense of old age. Here, there's sense of old age. That's how I feel. Anyway, each of these are separate pieces, cast separately in sand, out of plaster, and then cast at slightly different angles. I did an interesting thing. I'll just tell you briefly about this. I took a piece of sheetrock, and I made a drawing, an energy symbol drawing on it, and then some lines I drew on with silicone caulk so that they were raised. And other lines I cut with a knife, and so that they were removed. So you got this difference. And then I took all these separate pieces and I pressed them into wet sand, moist sand. And then I took them out carefully and I poured plaster into there so that this surface is the sand. And then each of these pieces, because they were pressed in at slightly different angles, became these puzzle pieces, and then I reassembled them into a piece. And I could, I guess, go back a couple till you could see what that whole looks like again there, so that you could see them going back together into this wonderful thing that looks 10,000 years old. So I loved that look, and under other circumstances where I don't have to just improvise the whole story, I like to present this work as if it is an ancient piece in an energy-conscious culture that always was energy-conscious. Another sand casting piece, sign of equilibrium. This piece is also, I consider to be an ancient piece in my own personal history. Maybe I could deal with it that way. This was one of the first early paintings on wood. Energy symbols were very new to me. There wasn't a very complete language, and there's an awkwardness about it, but there's a kind of rawness that I liked very much, and very, very primitive. And so I consider this very ancient art in my own history. And this is a clay sculpture. And what's significant about this is, to me, is not the sculpture itself, but the headband. And this headband was very, very significant to me at that time. And it came to me in a dream, and I don't know if there's time to say that dream, but it was a very interesting dream. Maybe it's worth saying. I dreamed that there were these senators or something around who wore togas, and we were in the center of this town, Grecian-like town, and we were senators, but we had just been overthrown, and it was minutes before they were going to come and take us away, and who knows what, execute us or something like that. There was a political upheaval. And one of the characters in this dream looked like Charles Lawton. I don't know who remembers him, but great big English guy. He was one of these senators. One of the younger ex-senators said, and so this Charles Lawton character said, "We will meet again in 10,000 years," or some incredible length of time. And so one of the younger senators said, "Well, how will we recognize one another?" And he reached under his belt as if we had been being watched, and he pulled out this headband, and he said, "We will wear this." And when I saw the headband, which is that headband, I understood that there were 8 magnets around the headband with very specific polarities. And they turn out to be plus, 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 minus, 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 plus, minus. And when And so a couple weeks later, after that dream, I made such a headband. And I was terrified. It took me another week to have the courage to put it on my head. I put it on my head, and I experienced a tremendous crushing sensation, and so I immediately took it off. Because part of this dream told me that when you wore this headband, you would have the values that this culture represented. So in a minute, I realized perhaps I had all of the magnets exactly opposite. In other words, I had no way of knowing whether this means plus in or plus out. And so I turned it inside out. I put it back on. And immediately the opposite feeling occurred. And I closed my eyes, and I began feeling an opening, an expanding, an unfolding, very much like they say, like a flower opening and opening and opening. And it put me in a tremendously deep meditative state. And so I took that headband. For a while, I made them for people, things like that, but I stopped doing that after a point. But I made that as a part of a symbol of this culture that I've tried to develop in my mind, so that I call it an equilibrium headband. And when I gave it to other people, they too immediately went into a tremendous meditative state. And so I did that for a while, and then I stopped doing that because when I invited people over for dinner, I would tell them about the headband, how wonderful this is, why don't you try it on? Boom, that's it. The end of conversation, because they would just stare at me for the rest of the night. They didn't want to talk, they didn't want to eat, they didn't want to do anything. So I said, forget this, this is, so that's what happened with that, so. Okay, this is what I call a fragment. For a while I painted on broken sidewalk stones because the idea was it looks like it was a great wall that was broken, and I happen to have the best piece from this wall mural, right? So that was terrific. That was content without context. I could just paint everything that I wanted to paint on these broken fragments and pretend that there had actually been a 100-foot wall that had crumbled, and this was the jewel of it. And so I made fragments for some time, and I just found broken sidewalks. Here's the same one. Here's, of course, the magnetic headband, and this is an equilibrium head, as I called it, from a seemingly lost culture that had fallen and yet hadn't occurred yet. So, and I like that space. I like thinking that that equilibrianism, though I don't like isms, is something that will slowly evolve and develop. And the reason why I don't mind it as an ism is because I think that that everything really is based on equilibrium, and we're in a universe that's equilibrium only momentarily divided by nanoseconds in order to produce this experience of a physical reality that we have. So I really do believe in equilibrium as reality, and it is a kind of a spiritual path for me. Here's another fragment, broken, again implying that there was some great painting that this is a part of. This is called Release from Polarity. These are the two polarities, white with black, black with white on either side forces. And this figure actually pivots freely, comes out three-dimensionally and pivots freely. This is a sign of equilibrium in all directions. His lips are signs of equilibrium. All of these, he's made up of energy symbols, and he is free from polarity. So this is a small energy altar, I call it. This, to me, is my own Rosetta Stone of explaining what the energy symbol language is. This is my version of the Last Supper. Here's the Christ figure, whom I take to be an enlightened being. And here are the apostles in energy symbols. So, what happens with this painting is that you get to, I call it a Rosetta Stone because you get to compare, it's like an energy X-ray between enlightenment or awakeness and being polarized, being not awake. And you see that what's happening is the apostles have taken these very intricate waves of self-definition. Desire, fear, desire, fear, desire, fear. Almost and sometimes balanced. This little point means a point of cancellation, a point of balance. Almost balanced by fear, desire, another rhythm, you see? So you have this doom-ti-doom-ti-doom-ti-doom and boom, boom, and occasionally you get this little dot where everything feels great. You know, everything's clear and obvious and understandable, and it's gone. Something that I certainly experience when you're walking down the street and suddenly everything is perfect and you don't know why. You're an awakened being. And then all of a sudden, you're all screwed up again, you know. And why? Because these waves of self-definition are washing through us all the time, and like record needles, we put our consciousness down on one of these waves. And it starts playing. Oh, what the hell did they say that for? Was that supposed to mean? Am I supposed to do that? You know? And we go through that kind of a thing. We listen to it and we think it's us thinking, but it's not. It's just us thinking that we're that. And so with all of these, they all have these very clever. This one goes loop-de-loop and up like that and catches itself just in time. This one, an intellectual, goes whoop, 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 like that. And then here's a fear wave. I don't know if you could see that. These real high frequency little wavelets. This one, very strung out, like that, see? And only in this little moment here is an accidental cancellation pattern between his desire and his fear. And that gives him that little moment. And that keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. And that's enough. But in a second, that might be 100th or 1,000,000th of a second of feeling awake, and the rest is riding another wave, being distracted. Also, they take these wonderful colors as their identity. So you notice here with the awakened figure that none of that has taken place. There's no color, and there's the simplest, most boring way of saying desire, fear, yeah, that's all gone. Every moment is met in perfect balance in that way. Neither desirous nor fearful, but just lucid, awake. Whereas they are invested in these identities, these waves of self-definition, these identity waves. And so that's the difference. So to me, this piece reflects that. And briefly, this fellow is about to step out on a tightrope, which the people back there can't see, but there's a tightrope stretched along here. And he's very confident, no fear, and it's because he's holding a gyroscope in his hand. So if anybody ever forces you to walk a tightrope, say, sure, but just ask for an electric gyroscope. Because if you have a gyroscope in your hand, it's like having a railing in your hand. It's a portable center, and it won't tip this way or that way. So if you start tipping, you could straighten yourself on that, and you could just walk across that very, very easily. So the point of that is, if you are centered, you are no longer part of the relative universe. You are absolute. There is no more down for you. There's no more place to fall. You are the center of the universe, and that's the only place you can be. So that's the point of that piece. A applying this not to a Christian theme, but to an ancient Chinese painting that I reinterpreted in energy symbols called The Death of the Buddha. So here are animals and monks all weeping, and the Buddha remains unchanged even in death. And so that was the point of that I was trying to get across with that painting. This is an energy altar, about 1.5 feet high. It's called Artemis and Actaeon, and the story of that is that Actaeon is a hunter, and he comes upon Artemis, who is also Diana, the huntress, and she's with her women hunters, and she's nude and she's bathing in the water, and he gapes at her, and she doesn't like that, and so she splashes him with water. She's a goddess, remember, and he begins changing into a stag, at which point his dogs see that he's prey and they attack him. So it took me a long time to think about that, and finally I realized it's okay to paint this. It wasn't a really, this is a sculpture, by the way, and that's a painting on the sides. Really, all she did was she turned the tables on the terms that he lived his life by. He chose to be a hunter, which means you go out and you kill things. And she just reversed the role that he had chosen. If he had been a stand-up comedian, for example, he might have been in his own audience, you know. And so that's all she was doing. She was just saying, whatever you are, I'm turning the tables on it so that you are what you do. You become the other part of it, the other half of it. And so that made me feel better about making this altar. And I was also trying to show that the concept of equilibrium goes back to ancient religions, and Buddhism and Christianity and all of the religions are basically based on polarity and equilibrium. And I'm reiterating that with this altar, which is half Christian, half Buddhist, half pagan, third pagan. Same. And this is entitled The Marriage Feast of Energy and the Void. These two symbolize energy and the void, and it's a time when the sun is out and the moon is out. It's a time of everything in balance. And I try periodically to show how energy and the void are actually our lovers. One sort of creates the other. Another energy altar, and the inside of that looks like this, and this is an altar about the future. There are flying machines, electric, and because there are flying machines instead of cars, you don't need roads. And because you don't need roads, there are these parks where the roads used to be, where people sit out and have a good time, teaching one another, talking to one another, and things of that sort. On the roof, there are plants growing. On the few buildings, all the streets have become parks. Here's an energy altar of a woman healing a man with light, and the light is coming down, going through a prism, breaking up into the 7 colors that light breaks up into, and these line up with all of his chakras. And so I thought that was a nice relationship between the 7 chakras and the 7 colors in frequencies of light. Here's the inside of that energy altar. Show that in energy symbols. Another altar. It's pretty brushy, actually, from this distance. That's the inside of that altar. Two women in an altar. The inside of that to show their relationship in energy symbols. This was a fertility altar, and it worked. These two wanted to have a baby, and they tried for 4 or 5 years, and so she got the idea to ask me to make an energy altar, and so I did. And so I painted her pregnant, and I painted her husband fishing with a net, because she told me he always went fishing, but he hardly ever caught any fish. And so I have these fish leaping out of the water, and this net full of fish in this forest scene. The idea was when they saw it, they would have an image implanted in their mind that it was okay to be vulnerable, okay to be pregnant, and there would be tremendous abundance to take care of all of their needs were that to happen. And so to just put that idea, our subconscious, it's sort of like a child in the sense that it believes everything that it sees. Nothing's humorous, and nothing is sarcastic or oh, I said it but I didn't mean it. You give them the subconscious an image and it will believe it, which is what's so crazy about watching horror shows and things like that. We take in all those images, and our poor subconscious takes it all as truth, even though we're saying, ho, look at that. Your body is still responding to that. So anyway, I try to use that principle, and so I did this, and 2 weeks later, she became pregnant. So that I consider it a pretty powerful altar, and she keeps it at the studio. She doesn't keep it home. This is just a little girl. I call it learning patience. Her mother is sitting there reading endlessly while she's waiting for them to leave this cafe. And I tried to show a little of that on the inside here. These people work at the Safeway. They turned out to be Jeannie and Dana instead of checkers. That was neat. And they always remember me. I showed them this painting, and they always remember this little altar. And I showed them with halos. Here's the checker, and here's the woman. Here's the bagger, and here's the checker. And I just tried to make it so people realize these people are feeding about 9,000 people a day. It's sort of, I just thought it was really important to show that. And so that's why I made it like an old religious painting. Two women. This woman was walking down the street carrying her baby. They just looked really happy, and I tried to make an energy altar that showed the way. I don't know if I have the inside of this, but the inside shows just the movement of that mother and the whole rocking, fleshy, rolling kind of thing that was about. It just seemed really neat to me. And this was an attempt to show the outside, the way we see things, and then to show the inside, the way the trees that I painted on the outside feel about being in the sun and the water and all of that, to try to just show the feeling of that tree, to try to get inside their mind. That's that woman walking with her baby. Here's just that rhythm. This was a really interesting thing. A woman had lupus, and she wanted an energy altar. And at the time, I was working with this concept, and I still think it's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting concept. She was an African-American woman, and she wanted an African savanna as a scene, and I built into it what is called a zapper. But a zapper is this. It's this concept that radio waves at a certain frequency can be set to kill parasites inside of a person. And there's no pain involved. It's just a little 9-volt battery, but it's the frequency that matches the frequency of bunches of parasites in your body. And I built one of these things, and I built it into this energy altar. And I have a couple. Oops, this is another altar. That's a nice one now. I lost it, but we'll come back to that other. I'm sorry. This one is about angels, and the idea to me is that I think that angels. I think that there's a higher frequency of civilization that we call angels, and I just tried to portray them as just beings, but sort of higher frequency. I don't know that I succeeded at all, but it gave me some fun ideas, like if they had a park, this could be a nice gate, and when they walked through that gate, they're on another planet. They can travel a tremendous distance by just walking through that little gate. It just gave me a sense that maybe there are what we call angels, but they're just higher frequency beings. And, maybe they like us, maybe they don't, who knows. But once in a while there might be a little border exchange. Probably we would get the benefit of that. Here we're back to that energy altar. And for the handholds, I used African bracelets. This is the inside of that electronic device. And I covered the wires with these beads that I made out of clay. The handholds are these bracelets. And here's the electronics for it. And she used it. I don't know, a lot of good things have happened with these zappers. But I never followed up how it helped this woman or not. But it kept a dog that was given a couple of weeks to live, 2.5 years worth of running around. So it had a certain power to it. This is called a walk in the void. It's the idea that the void, to me, the void is consciousness, and all this stuff is energy expressing its nature. And I tried to make a little thing that showed someone who saw it as conceptual. She's walking through a conceptual city. She can see right through the earth, in a sense. She's in the void, and quite happily so. A mural for the Berkeley Jewish Community Center of Noah's Ark. A little closer. These are all the Noah's Ark details. These are from painted umbrellas, handheld umbrellas. Yeah, these are all little sections of umbrellas. I started doing this a long time ago. I don't know how many years ago. But then I guess somebody saw it, and they started making these umbrellas that are reproductions of Sunday in the Park with George, or no, a Sunday Afternoon in the Park, Surahs, and so everybody kind of, the shock value was gone. You know, I mean, people just assumed that it was a print on there, so that was too bad. This is ceramic work, again, trying to imprint energy symbols and then juxtapose it to a drawing. Another. Ceramic mural. Details of that. This is a man's life story in a 7-foot square, huge, heavy ceramic mural. Huge and heavy. Different aspects of his life in symbols. This was the Linus Pauling 90 feet of ceramic mural, and I made all the tiles. Mary Tewksbury, who's in the audience here, did the color work, and basically she's the one who understands ceramics. So we worked together on that, and other murals too. And these are details of it. All from Linus Pauling's work and his life. There's a portrait of Linus Pauling. These don't exist. These are photo maquettes, but I wanted them to exist. I took them to Bart, but they didn't go for them. These are ideas that I had. The fellow said that people would fall, that they'd be so disoriented they couldn't get up the stairs. I forget what he said about this one. This is a tile, a ceramic tile. This is it's distorted. This is the Berkeley Bowl Marketplace, 11 ceramic tiles, which Mary also helped me on. These are blow-ups of the tiles themselves. These are, 16 inches by 19 inches, very big single pieces. And Mary did wonderful work to satisfy the bill of getting shabui, if I pronounce it right, I never know, colors, which are a Japanese color sense. I asked her what those colors, to give me an idea of what shabui colors were when we were talking about the commission, and she said, not the colors you're wearing. So. Okay, I'm going to just start paint an umbrella that I used for years and years. That one I really used. Okay, we're right back at the beginning. Now, it took me longer. We went for an hour, and I have almost as many slides, so I probably will just end it there. You get a sense of what I've done, and but I wouldn't want to take more of your time. But if there's any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer them. I do. I have a couple. One is energyart.com, and the other, which I'm just creating to show these, which and that website is moduleart, moduleart.com. And this is if you saw the show, you'll see that these are reproductions of some of my paintings in archival prints, and that is their acid-free paper on with acid-free ink, and their miniature reproductions, and they're magnetic. And the idea is that people can arrange whatever design they please with this. And there's a bag with a total of 50 images for like a starter set. And that the idea is that you'd be able to get continued pieces as you go, so that this, to me, is the fulfillment of what I want to do. I realized a while ago nobody could afford to buy 10 or 15 of my paintings and play around with them. And if they could afford it, they probably aren't in a playing mood. And so this is the way that I think people can not be intimidated by it and actually interact with this work. And within minutes, they forget that these are my paintings. They become their configurations, their designs. And that's very important. So it puts people, it destroys that fearful surface tension between, oh, I'm not an artist, I can't do anything, and suddenly seeing that art is something that is way bigger than all those self-definitions. It's a teacher. And once you start playing with it, it's going to start teaching you spatial relationships and things that you can't imagine. And it's that I want to encourage people to just jump into, almost kind of trick them into getting into that, and then it'll be their artwork. It won't be mine. What I believe, and that's part of all of the symbolism of this and the whole energy thing, is I believe that emptiness, which isn't energy, I mean just real emptiness, is actually what we call awareness or consciousness. And the awareness or consciousness is intrinsic to a universe of absolute nothingness going to infinity. And if you have nothingness to infinity, you have consciousness, because it's an impossible dilemma. It is infinite emptiness, and yet it can't be infinite. And so it's an awakening irony that can't be what it is, and that is what we call consciousness, you see. And so intrinsic to that is this medium that we call physical reality that is actually the other half of that. It takes a while to explain it, so I won't bother, but it can be explained. It's understandable. I believe it's an understandable universe that we're in. And a lot of the ancient symbolism explains it. Things you see a Mexican hat, and it has these things on it and spirals and stuff, and you think that it's decoration, but it's not decoration. It's ancient Aztec, esoteric religious symbols that try to explain all this stuff in symbolism. So how does that answer your question? It means that I think that the one who's talking here, there's only one singular consciousness. The one who's talking is the one who's listening. It's just that we have two different definitions of what it's like to be this infinite thing. And so you don't need to be a channel, because you have non-spatial access to everything that could ever be. So you don't have to channel. We are all that. you know. A mother who you never knew how mad she was going to be when you went in the house. And so you had to stand outside of the house and know where mom was at before you went in. And so that made me extremely energy conscious, to the point where I could go into a room, a restaurant, and I know what everybody's feeling, unfortunately. And it's very, very tricky because all people are feeling all these different things, and for some reason, that thing that lets you feel stuff opened up in me, and it never was able to close up. So I feel all that stuff, and so it made me want to make people energy conscious so that they could understand all that stuff that's going on. Because I believe if you become energy conscious, you're growing, only it's way before a physical level, you know. In other words, all these innuendos happen in the energy realm. If you become aware of them, you never get into an argument. It's hard to explain, but it's a finer tune reality. No, I don't. I feel it, yeah. Go back in what way? You mean make them or wear them? Yeah, I want to wear them. I find the weaker the magnet, the more powerful it is. For a while I made them with big, powerful magnets, and little teeny weak ones are sweet. They're like wine. They're all different. Each one has a different sweetness about it. They're quite amazing. You know, Buffalo, I grew up in Buffalo. I came here, and I've been planning a trip to San Jose for several years now, but from there. And then I came here. Yes, you're my father. Yeah. He was an inventor, and with the other slides and things, there are other things there, but it's a lot. It's too much. Any more questions? Okay. Thanks very, very much. That's great.